Good evening, rail fans, and welcome to another stream with me, Train Guy. And tonight I'm going to be showing a little bit of love to a unit that I've really not played enough with on the stream, and that's the mighty 101. And tonight it'll be a full run from Leeds to Manchester. It's the only one I'm planning to do because it is quite a long one. This bit an hour and a half it usually takes. I've done a couple of practice runs with it, and not going to muck about too much at the start. I'm just trying to think which I want one that the lighting's not going to be too dark for most of the way. We'll do a nice clear autumn day, and we'll just jump straight on in. Some new content dropped today, the mastery thing. Not going to talk much about it because it's predictably absolutely knackered on the consoles, so not much to see there at the moment, but I don't really care about that sort of stuff, to be honest with you. I bought the game to drive trains, not to faff about unlocking achievements and nonsense like that. Plenty of other games for that, if that's your thing. As we see the lovely splash screens for almost every other route apart from the one we're on. Okay, not sure if it's the left or right doors that we're using here. Yeah, it's the left doors, so a very quick cab setup. Oh, I didn't want to do that, want to do that. Oh bugger, it's a double header as well, which is an extra long run down to the back. And just set the rear lights. Turn the blind light on, and while we're here, turn on the train lights. Nash back into the front. We've got about half a minute to go. Close the door. I've already set the blind here. I have indeed. I think the key's already been done. That's fine. Set the reverser, set the gearbox, lock the doors. Whew. And off we go. Hey Tommy, good to see you, mate. Welcome. Just getting underway, not missed very much apart from the world's fastest setup. Should probably pay attention up ahead just in case there's any signals and stuff. Oh, a little bit too much power there, not to worry. We'll just give it a little dab of the brakes. Maybe a bit of a bigger dab. There we go. So it's a 4-car set, or two units coupled up together here. Didn't actually realise there were any of those on the timetable apart from the specials, but there you go, live and learn. If felt inspired to have a play with this one today because I was lucky enough to be reading an original driver's manual from about 1957 for these things earlier on today. Hi Samson, welcome to the stream, good to see you, man. You've not missed much, just a very, very hurried setup, and we've just left Leeds. Probably about an hour and a half to reach Manchester. All things being equal. So first gear up to 15 miles an hour. Change gear, count to 2 and put the power back in. Second gear will take us all the way up to 27 miles an hour, so we are of course speed limited for this first little section. Probably a bit chilly in the middle of autumn to have the window open on in this part of the world. Ah, mastery. Just before you came in, I did mention it very briefly for the benefit of anybody watching this later on. Not much to say about it, mate, because I have got the update, but predictably it's knackered on consoles. Nothing seems to be working properly. So there doesn't seem to be much to see there at the moment. That said, for me personally, maybe some of you guys feel a bit differently, I don't really care too much about that sort of part of the game, the achievements and the hidden stuff up and down the lines. It's not really what I bought the thing for, but so for me personally, don't really care too much that it doesn't work properly. I'm sure they'll iron the kinks out at some point though. Twitter seems to be alive with people complaining about it. The forums were also filling up with people, and I kind of wish I'd known about the live stream because that could have been hilarious if I'd known about that. I suspect there might have been a few people on there voicing their thoughts on it. So third gear up to 41 miles an hour, and if you're driving from this gauge, it's that first little white line of the two just outside the yellow zone is your change gear marker. Oh, to be honest, it is much easier just to have this thing sitting here on the HUD. As soon as I see the next signal, we'll maybe do a quick run by a bit further down. Oh yeah, the vacuum brakes definitely take a bit of getting used to it, that's for sure. The trick with the vacuum brakes is you're supposed to come on them pretty hard to begin with, and then you're supposed to let them out as the train rolls to a halt. I'll talk about that when we actually get to a station. Again, I was fortunate enough to get access to an original driver's manual produced by the vacuum brake company circa 1962 or something like that, not long ago. And it gave me a couple of useful insights that, how useful they are in the game, well, I mean, it's not like they're real people in the back of the train now. There's a red there, but the next signal is beyond the station we're stopping at, so we don't worry too much. but we do need to get down to 50 for the speed limit. So yeah, there is definitely a knack to the vacuum brakes. Practice is the main thing that you need with them, just because they're so different to what you'll be used to. And you can actually brake a lot later than you initially think with them. Feedback. Oh, I think they've been getting feedback all right. Not necessarily the sort they want, but I've seen them getting it. So it's still a mile to run. We can give ourselves another. We've got a wee bit of time yet. What I always find useful though is when I know I'm going to be braking, move the brake valve handle close to or to the lap position well in advance. Not what you're supposed to do in real life, but you can get away with it in the game. And we're also going uphill on this section, so that's going to help us a little bit as well. So 800, 700 yards ish. 650, we'll bang them on now. Just open them all the way and let the pressure drop to about 8 inches on the gauges there. You'll be fine. That was probably too early, so we'll just let it back out to about 15 inches. And we just drift on in. I'm just going to let them out a little bit. It's a 4-car set, so I need to make sure I'm right up at the end of the platform. Just ready to unlock the door as soon as we stop. Now, when I'm talking about inches, I'm talking about this needle on the left here on this gauge. Those numbers represent, it's inches per cubic, so it's pounds per cubic inch of pressure or something like that. All you need to know is they're referred to universally as inches. When the train is at rest, you're supposed to return it to a minimum of 18 inches of pressure in the train pipe. The train pipe is the part that's controlling how much air is being applied to the brake shoes themselves, to the brake calipers. So as you remove air from that pipe, the brakes come on harder. And the pipe on the right, the release pipe, is the part of the system that pumps air back into the brakes to release them again. So what you'll see is as we release the brakes, that pressure will drop as air is being transferred back into the brake system. So there you go, you see it drops a little bit and then it comes back up as that system recharges itself. The harder you got the brakes on, the more movement you'll see on that needle. You don't really need to know too much about how that works. At 15 miles an hour, up into second gear. Second gear to 27. And the procedure is close the throttle, up the gear, and then back up again. What you're actually supposed to do is, on this gauge here, when you release the throttle, you change gear when the needle drops back to about the middle here, count to 2, and then pop it open again. That's the official driver's manual way, but you can be a lot more sloppy playing the game. So 41 miles an hour is when you change up to 4th. So close the valve, close the throttle, change the gear, count to 2, pop it back in again, and it should come back up with the power comfortably in this yellow band here. Pop the light on so there's something to look at. I don't usually use it in the tunnels, but there ain't much else to see. But you would normally have, you would have some light spilling in from the cab to, from the passenger compartment in reality. You would have some sort of illumination in here. For anybody who's still not sure what all the fuss about ray tracing on the next generation of hardware is, ray tracing will basically make that effect much easier to do. Just return the throttle down to 1, and if you zero the throttle when you're coasting, you're actually supposed to put the train into neutral. Never bother with it, because I always forget to put the bloody thing back into gear before I jump on the power. Blast on the horn as we come out the tunnel. Mile to run to Batley, or Batley, I don't know how that's pronounced. Oh, thank you, Tommy. I really just talked to myself, to be honest with you. I'm sure plenty would disagree with that sentiment. Of course, it also depends what I'm talking about, I guess, or ranting occasionally. A bit of brake just to get that speed back under control, because I wasn't paying enough attention there. Half a mile to run, or just over half a mile. We're going downhill this time, so we'll give ourselves a little bit more time. So we'll put about 10 or 11 inches of pressure in to begin with, just to start the deceleration, and then about 500 yards. If I need it, I'll plug it in a bit more. Definitely going to need more. In fact, I think we're going to overshoot. This has taken a little bit longer to respond, I think, because it's just a slightly heavier train with the 4 cars. I wasn't allowing for that. And if you just release it a little before you come to a halt there, just let the pressure back out slightly, what that does, and I've turned my wipers on. As you draw up to a halt, you're supposed to let a little bit of the pressure back out again, and that just stops the thing from jerking to a sudden stop. Anybody who's ever ridden on one of these things, which I'm old enough to have done, sometimes if the driver was trying to make up a bit of time, or certain sort of hills and things where it wasn't always practical to do that, you would get a very sudden jarring stop. And I've also not let the pressure back out to 18 there. Don't think it makes a difference in the game. It's a more of a real world issue, that. So we've actually got about 45 seconds to spare. Sometimes the timing can be a bit funny on this route, I find. You'll struggle to make it to some stations on time, and then find that at the end of the route you've made it more or less on time anyway. Especially the section between Huddersfield and Stalybridge can be quite tough going, because it's all uphill. Well, I guess that's the thing about virtual trains, mate, is nobody's going to get hurt if you spad while you're pished. I've already shut the gates, the doors, haven't I? So release the brakes, pop the power in, and off we go. So next stop, Dewsbury. Now I practiced this on a 2-car set earlier on, and the timings were a bit less generous than they seem to be this time. I don't know whether this is making allowances for the extra length of the train with that second unit coupled onto the back. So, up into third. Haven't bothered turning the AWS on, although it is there if you want it. There's not a ramp anywhere on this route, so it seems a bit pointless. And if you've ever wondered where the DSD is on this train, it's not a DSD like they have on modern trains. This train actually uses a dead man's handle system, so the throttle is actually the DSD. It's spring loaded, and if you let go of it, it snaps back up into the idling position. And once it does that, after 2 seconds, if you still haven't pulled it back, the vacuum brakes will come on by themselves. Obviously that's quite difficult to model into the game, so it's not there in any usable form. But they did have DSD on these, just a very antiquated form of it. So I'm just going to let that brake pressure back out a little, because it was way too hard on them to begin with. And in fact we'll release them even further. We'll just coast on in. And about 12 inches of pressure on the brakes should be enough for us. Maybe a little bit more is... And then just a little bit out as we come to a halt. Now we're 60 yards past the stopping point or whatever. To be honest, I just tend to aim for the end of the platform. You're still well enough within distance to for it to count. It's quite a long platform here. But I feel sometimes that the stopping points are almost a little bit arbitrary in this game. So set the gears back down to first. Let that brake pressure back out again. Thing with having your brake pressure set back out to 18 as well is that it's just less time for the brakes to come off once you're ready to go as well. You don't have to wait for them to fully recharge. So, fairly fast stretch of line, but the stations are quite close together along this this section. I need to have a look at some of the not quite full route ones. Maybe the Saturday special will have a bit of that sounds like one that might have a bit of what's the phrase I'm looking for, a bit fewer stops perhaps. It would be cool if there was a route on the 101 where you could really open it up. So a double yellow there. We're on the section of line where one side is marked with the old semaphores, but the up line is marked with modern electric signals. One of the reasons I do like this route, just the mixed types of signalling and stuff that you come across. Kind of cool. So I'm not going to go above 50 here. This is where I sometimes lose a little bit of time, but for the sake of managing it with the vacuum brakes and things, you as well just not overcooking it. And we're coming into Ravensthorpe as well. So 800 yards. We'll put about 10 or 11 inches in to begin with. could actually probably be somewhat more aggressive with these. The trick with the toolboxes wasn't on the handles on these things. It was the DSD fitted to the big Type 4 diesel electric. So things like the 40... Sorry, I'm just concentrating a little bit on this stop here because that signal's quite easy to run past. The big Type 4 diesel electric, so that's your class 40, your 45, your 47. Those had a foot plate in front of the driver. It was a pressure plate, so you had to sit with your foot pushing down on this plate the whole way. And yes, it was not entirely unknown for drivers to stick their toolbox down because you got a bloody sore leg sitting like that for hour after hour. That's entirely true, and it's one of the reasons after a crash involving a train where it turned out that the driver had been doing that they revised the whole system to the bell and the button, the sound and response system. So get ready just to lock your door straight away. In fact, I think there was actually more than one accident involving trains where the drivers had been doing something naughty with the toolbox, but I think there was a bad one. Oh, it was down south somewhere, I forget where it was. I've read part of the report on it, and it was certainly a catalyst for overhauling the way DSD worked on UK mainline trains. The 101s were never modified though, because the system built into the throttle handle was deemed adequate. And these handles, they were electromechanical, so you didn't need to use much force or pressure to work them anyway. But because you were always moving it on these trains, you very rarely sat with it in the same position for great lengths of time, just because of the type of route they were on. It wasn't so problematic for drivers as sitting for literally sometimes for hours at a time with your foot pressing down on a plate that was pushing back against you. So we're already approaching Murfield. We're about a quarter, third of the way along. Motoring along quite nicely. I've got no idea what the last signal I passed was at, by the way. I'm too busy chatting. I could be in for an unpleasant surprise. This could be a shorter stream than I thought as well. No, we've got a yellow, that's fine. So we could be following a passenger train from Leeds. The signalling would certainly suggest so. It's slightly uphill here, so about 10, maybe 9 inches to begin with. Again, you can let it out or put some more on as required. So we're going to be about a minute late on platform, but you can be within 3 minutes and it will still give you it. So we'll just let that out a bit more, because we are going to be going down more or less to the end of the platform. And some of these platforms are actually too short for a 4-car set, which is where having the guards on board would come into play. And the platform guards as well, obviously, would be making sure that nobody was doing anything stupid, opening the wrong doors. There we are, we're on with bags of room to spare. So again, I'm just letting the brake pressure back out a bit. And then stick it back into the lap position just to hold it. nice quick stops here. I find it very difficult to go back to the routes that make you sit for the full minute now, with the more recent routes having the shorter dispatch time. Of course, the other way to tell if you can put the power back in is this number here. It greys out when you do the gear change, and you have to wait for it to turn white again to tell you that it's okay to re-engage the throttle. So we are heading towards a speed limit zone, but we'll not be doing 50 by the time we get there, I wouldn't have thought. It's a very good sightseeing cab, this. You've got a fairly good field of view from where you're sat, compared to some of the big Type 4s. So junction up ahead, and we'll do that little sort of downhill then uphill bit. The white lights above the signal there just confirming that the points are set for leaving this main line. So back on the throttle, because that uphill gradient suddenly becomes quite a sharp downhill. If you time that properly, you shouldn't actually need to hit the brakes. And you can come into that at about 46 or 47 and still be alright. And then just put the power on as you go through the dip, and you shouldn't actually lose too much momentum on the uphill section. .4% gradient, we will not accelerate up it. We might pick up the speed suddenly very quickly as we level off though, but you're straight into the 70, and again, I tend not to worry if my speed just goes over for a moment or two at this part. These limits are all set with tolerances built into them, with margins built into them. And in 1983, the trains were not loaded with electronic gadgets spying on the drivers like they are now, so don't sweat it too much. So we'll be coming into Dayton on a fairly steep uphill, which again means we'll get a little bit of help from good old gravity when we hit the brakes. Biggest danger is being complacent, thinking that you're going to get more help from gravity than you actually do. That's when it all goes wrong. So I'm only putting about 14 inches in to begin with, and then at 500 yards I'll increase that, or decrease that if you like, to just below 10. Oh, that was a funny sounding noise there. That was very clown car-ish. And then we can just release the brakes out a smidge. Might have just hung the front door over the edge there. Let me just set the brakes and we'll have a look. because we're on an uphill, I'm only going to release them to about 15 inches this time. So we're okay at the back, we're just on at the back. We're plenty on at the front. That's quite a tricky platform to stop at with a 4-car set. I have overshot it plenty of times before. That tree trunk I always think is awfully close to the line, but okay, so we're almost halfway there already. Next up is Huddersfield. Any Doctor Who fans out there? The current Doctor, that's where she's from, Huddersfield. Jodie Marsh. She's, not Jodie Marsh, what the fuck's her name again? I've forgotten her name now. Jodie Marsh was the model. Actress that plays the current Doctor, she's from Huddersfield. So, not quite as punchy with the acceleration going up this hill. Although actually with the 2-cars, or with the 4-car set, it does seem to be able to do a little better. Of course, you've got another extra set of engines courtesy of that down the back. Can pretty much keep the power in going up this hill. You can brake fairly late for this because it is uphill all the way into the station. Oh, tanker train going the other way. Can actually sometimes hear the difference between the full ones and the empty ones. That one wasn't clanking and banging as much as the full ones do. So you need to be at 40 by about that signal, and then you've got not much time to get down to 15, but perfectly doable once you've got a bit of confidence with the brakes, and you can whack them on pretty hard at this point. And then just let them out again. Oh, make sure you're in low gear though, if you do need to give it just a bit of power. So we're actually going about halfway up the platform before we cross over, and I'm not sure how tight a fit it's going to be, but I will try and take it as close to the platform signal as I can. let's just see, did we get clean off the... Oh, we're just a yard or two shorter than I wanted to be, but not the end of the world. So you can see we're still slightly on the points there, which would just put that rear door just a half a foot or so further away from the platform than it normally would be. But nobody had heard of health and safety in 1983, so it's all good. And as soon as we stopped, we're off again. Now this is the bit where you never make Slaithwaite on time because of the uphill. And almost as soon as you begin cornering, you should be able to run it up to about 50. You can hear a train going through the tunnel next to us actually. It's not a very long tunnel this. The exit's just around this bend. So it's a 1% incline. And the train probably will feel a bit asthmatic once we get up to around 40. It's going to struggle to climb this hill. Certainly won't be doing 65 anytime between here and Slaithwaite as far as I remember. Let's gnash up the track a little bit, do another run by. Always like a run by. Yay! Hooray for the run by. And there we go, we've gained a whole 2 miles an hour I think during that little sequence. The little engine that could. Indeed. Remembered the cup of coffee I've had sitting there for about 40 minutes now. It's just nice and tepid. Very fitting for a BR journey though. Lukewarm coffee, yum yum yum. All I need now is a ham sarnie with the edges curled up. Iced coffee's a bit too sophisticated for British Rail circa 1983. Or at least iced coffee as you know it. If you mean iced coffee but as in just freezing bloody cold because something was broken in the kitchen again, then yeah. So 2 miles to run and we're supposed to be there in 1 minute. We're not likely to make that. Never have made Slaithwaite on time. But hopefully by the time we reach Manchester it'll have evened itself out a little. So 1.3 miles to the next main signal, but just always keep in the back of your mind that there could well be a distant signal that's not counted on that marker thing there. And right on cue, here comes a green distant signal ahead of us. So a little over a mile to run, just get your brake lever into position. The last mile tends to go past quicker than you would think. We're going to just kill that throttle. It is quite a steep uphill still, so gravity will again do its thing. We're already losing speed there. We'll just give it an armful of brake there, down to about 6 or 7 inches to begin with, because this is another short platform. So I'd rather have to take the brakes off a bit than realise I've not given it enough. Now you see, I don't always release it up to 100% release, because the further you turn the handle, the faster the air is being pumped back into the system again. So I think this is one where it doesn't matter what you do, you cannot get all the doors onto the platform. So what would happen in reality is the guard would be shouting at everybody, next stop, Slaithwaite, first car only on this back unit. I should really have both those doors lined up on the front car of the tail unit. But you would not have these doors hanging open in real life. The train crew would make sure that didn't happen. Just a little foible of playing with a simulator. A 2-car set, dead easy to get onto that platform though, with a bit of practice. So Marsden next, and then after that the Standage Tunnel. Originally actually 3 tunnels at Standage. 2 of them were railway tunnels, 1 of them was a canal tunnel. All 3 of them are still there. I think the canal tunnel was closed many decades ago, and not much goes up it apart from the odd maintenance boat. Network Rail do keep the other rail tunnel in full working order, although it's not actually used anymore. They keep it maintained in case there's ever a problem with the main tunnel. All 3 of them built across a period of about 30 or 40 years in the mid-19th century. So we're still going up a hill, but it's not as steep as the one we were going up before. Probably unlikely to reach full speed still though, because it's not far enough to... not a long enough distance between the stations to really wind it up. very hands-on train this. You don't get as much time to sit and just take your hands off the controls, so to speak, as you do with most others. This is one of the longest stretches of line where you don't really need to touch it at all. So again, the main signal marker is telling me it's nearly a mile to go, but getting hit with a distant signal here, so it's green, so we've got nothing to really worry ourselves about. We're now running a good couple of minutes behind the timetable time. But still within acceptable limits. I'm just getting the brake handle ready. I don't know what's down there, that's just a wee roadway. And again, half a mile to run. Think about coming off the power. Just over half a mile to run rather. There we go. Whap the handle open, get that brake pressure nice and low. And again, we'll just let a lot of that back out now because we were a bit sharp on it. This is another platform that it's long enough, but it feels shorter than it is. Just releasing the brake as we stop, and that just stops that sudden jerk and stop. And again, just return the brake pressure to about 18, 19. Lock the doors up, and we're already set to go. Should probably be looking ahead to where the signal is, but never mind. So almost immediately on leaving Marsden, we'll come around this bend. Very short 40-mile-an-hour zone just because of the tight corner going into the tunnel. There's the canal off to the left there somewhere. See if we can see the other tunnel entrance. You can see it from the other end as you come in. So there's a canal down to the right there, the railway passes over it, and the tunnel entrance is just down there to the right. And off to the left there are the other railway tunnels. Now those are actually maintained to this day. I don't know if they replaced the track that was dug up at some point, because a lot of reworking was done of this line during the 80s and 90s. I know the tunnel itself is still in good condition. It doesn't actually take that long to lay a piece of track if they ever needed to bring that tunnel back into service again. flick the light on just so there's something to look at, because this is quite a long tunnel. There are no front lights, mate. I've got the markers turned on. You see them there. But back then, the markers on the train were not so the driver could see what was in front of him. It was so that people in front of him could see the train coming. That's all they're there for. Night driving was a highly, highly skilled thing, and they didn't do much of it. Very little traffic on the network at night. You would have the occasional long distance sleeper train and goods trains mostly, but all the passenger stuff was generally off by midnight at the absolute latest, and the drivers who did drive in the dark were a very special breed, it's fair to say. The idea that the headlights should actually be useful for seeing anything, that doesn't come along until well into the 1990s. Things like driving through a tunnel and knowing when to brake for the upcoming speed limit. You did that with a stopwatch and calculating how far you'd gone based on your speed. It was all very clever stuff, all very low tech, but all done by it was all just the skill and the experience of the driver. No fancy computery gadgets telling you when to start slowing down. And I think they do actually still train the drivers. They teach the drivers how to do that, so that if an instrument suddenly dies on them, as sometimes happens with technical stuff, any engineer will tell you, the more high tech you make something and the more gadgets you put on it, well, that's just more stuff to break and go wrong. So I believe those skills are still taught to them to one degree or another, but certainly not routinely used anymore. Just give that a little dab of brake just to hold the speed on this downhill slope. And there we go, we're into the 60 zone. You only need to take a couple of inches out of the train pipe to hold the speed mostly. So I think the next couple of stops we do will actually be going downhill, so a little bit trickier than the uphill stops, but nothing to be unduly worried about. Again, just practice, practice, practice is all it's about with these. Tees Valley line, if you have it, is a really good line for practicing with the 101, because it's not got as many severe hills on it. So half a mile to run. We'll just get ready to start slowing down, because we are coming from quite a high speed now. I'm going to want more than that. I'm going to take it right down to 5 inches in the pipe there. Hello Alike, welcome to the stream. It was, let me just play here, Control and 6 if you have a USB keyboard. You do need a keyboard to do that though. You see they just briefly popped up in the corner there as I did it. Let's just let these brakes back out a smidge and we can pop them back in again if we have to. Which I think I might actually have to, just to make sure I get the entire thing on platform. There we go. I had to have a think about that when I was asked that earlier, because it's been so long since I turned them off. I couldn't actually remember the exact combination. Definitely not a terrible investment, mate. All the PC controls work. The brake controls don't work, but to be honest, the pad's actually kind of better for that stuff. I mean, the keyboard I use cost me about £5 out of Curry's PC World, the cheapest one they had in the shop, and it does me just grand for this kind of thing. You'd be surprised how many games actually accommodate it as well. Of course, the coolest thing about having the keyboard is it makes doing this easy. No mucking about with click spots for me. Haha, no. Because I find that with this, it's not quite as quick and fluid. Just nip a little bit further down. We'll have another run by while it's a fairly straightforward section of track. Makes your run bys much cooler as well when you've got the keyboard, because you can you can just jump between the camera angles and things without having to go through all those menus. You can use all these different views and stuff as well. To be honest, I actually bought the keyboard for Elite Dangerous back in the day because I wanted to be able to use the in-game chat function, but very pleased to discover it works with Train Sim as well, and that they've kept that in it. They've never taken that away from us. So just braking a little bit now to allow for the downhill, just making sure I can see my brake gauge clearly. How are we doing for time? So we're still running a little bit behind, but not the end of the world. Far too early on the brakes there, actually. Just want to stop it from gaining any more speed, and then we'll just pop them in now. Can't remember how long this platform is. And then just if you've got the brakes on really hard, then as you roll to a stop, just let them out a little bit to prevent that sudden jerk and stop. Very, very quick stop. Not much time spent sat still. And we'll get ready to lock them up as soon as the timer finishes. There we go. Yeah, £9, pretty reasonable. I only paid a fiver for mine, to be honest with you. The cheapest of the cheap and nasty seems to do it. So, picking up the speed into the tunnel, just sort of being mindful that up ahead I am going to have a fairly rapid drop to 15 as we enter, as we approach Staley Bridge. Downhill most of the way as well, so just keep that in the back of your head doing this bit. Stick it into idle. Maybe just take a couple of inches of air out of those pipes just to stop us rolling over the 60. I'm still trying to gauge when I should be hitting the brakes on this bit for the 15. I can do it in the big Type 4s, but the 101 I'm still very much a learner on. I like PC, thank you very much, sir, but I fear you're far too kind to me. I'm nowhere near as good as PTG Rail. He really is a... I learned a lot of what I knew from watching PTG Rail's videos. Certainly the early days learning things like the German routes and stuff, that was a lot of help. But it's very kind of you to say so. And we'll just jump on the brakes now and hope we get down. We'll actually probably make it down to 15 just about in time. Although if anybody's sitting with a cup of tea down the back, they're probably wearing it out. But there we go, just about kept that under control the whole way down. Find yourself faffing about a lot with the brakes coming down this wee bit. It's a lot more tricky to just hold a constant speed than it is with the air brakes on the Type 4s. Although you can, if you want, when you're driving the passenger trains on this line, you can with the big Type 4s stick the vacuum brakes on. It's the Mark II passenger coach can run either or. And just mindful of the red signal up ahead. Yeah, vacuum brakes on the Mark II coaches. By 1983, the trains were they would run either or, and the decision was often based on, well, which one works on most of the coaches, because the coaches are absolutely knackered by then. And it was often down to which set of brakes had the most functioning units on a rake. Ah, nice one. I like it. It's always good to hear somebody got something useful from my inane ramblings to myself. It's fair to say I had too much time on my hands for a while last year and earlier this year, and I did get a bit obsessive about learning how to use that system. I just found it added so much more to the game for me, though. Learning that sort of extra layer of complexity. So see, we're having to wait a little while for the brake to unwind because I didn't do the release pressure thing early on. It's not too much of a hassle. I've yet to sort of over rev the engine on this and do any damage. I've done it with the Type 4s a few times. Just get that speed back under control a little bit. We can pretty much release them now. Probably just go straight up to second gear as well. So we're at that sort of changeover point. There we are. So I think 3 more stops to go: Ashton Underline, Park, and then Miles Platting. Oh, should have changed gear. Not a very long trip to the next station either, so I'll get the brakes set up ready for the next application already. Not even going to bother going up into 4th gear. So again, just an initial application down to about 10 inches or so, and then just adjust from there. And we'll just cruise on in. Just a little, let them out a little, and then stick the lap back on again. And that horrible little pause as I go into the menu. Yeah, cool. I haven't actually seen that much traffic compared to some of the other runs I've done, but then middle of the day, probably not peak time. And I've not let the brakes back out either. Ooh, naughty, naughty. I was actually rolling before I had the doors fully shut there. Of course, no train safety interlocks back then either. And I don't think they ever were fitted to these old slam door things. So 4 miles to park, so we will get a decent lick of speed on here. Just paying attention to the semaphores as you go by. Yellow one's your distant, red one's your main. A little tip for stopping these things is I've discovered that rather than fixing on the number up here in the top corner and watching that yard counter go down, it's fine for sort of starting your braking, but as you enter the station, just watch the platform. Do it from what you can see out the window, rather than fixating on all these numbers at the top of the screen and down on your HUD. It feels far more natural if you just watch what the environment's doing. Once I learned to stop fixating on the heads-up display so much, it became a lot more natural. Had far fewer overshoots or undershoots as well. Again, just a little bit of air into the system there, or air out of the system rather, to hold the speed. And then the limit changes back up to 60 as we pass under this bridge ahead. So assuming we've got all greens, which we do, just let the brakes out now. Let's just run down the track a little bit. Have another run by. Had to jump back in the cab there because I was getting awfully close to the speed limit. And there we go, the infamous brake sound bug has struck. I'm no longer getting the sound when I hit the brakes. I've never quite sussed out what triggers that, but it always seems to happen after I've been outside, so I don't know if switching to the outside cameras too often does that or what. But, mildly irritating, but if you can comfortably use the gauge down here, it doesn't matter too much. It does feel a little strange though, pulling on the brake handle and not hearing that hissing noise. It actually doesn't happen to me that often, but I have to admit that when I'm not streaming, I almost never leave the cab view, because I'm a bit of a saddle like that. So I want to be braking for that 45, so I'm hitting them pretty hard down to about 5 or 6 inches of pressure, because we are going downhill. And we'll just keep them in a bit. We'll let them back out to about 10 inches just now, because we're still a good way away from the platform. I'm going to just release them all the way out to about 15. Just let them out all together and then pop them back on. Oh, that was far too hard. Okay, so maybe not having the air sound does make a difference. You just want to make sure the back end's not hanging off. Probably well and truly on by now. I wonder if standing up and sitting down fixes it. That sometimes fixes these sound bugs, doesn't it? Let's let it back out a bit to 18, and then I'll just pop it back in and see if we've got... Nah, it's not cleared it. Okay. Not the end of the world, only 2 stops to go. Just being mindful of the drop to 20 before we get into miles platting. Oh, in fact, I need more brakes, more brakes. And then we'll arrive at 20 far earlier than planned. Actually, it is kind of more distracting than I realised without that sound. Again, this is a longer platform than you might initially think. Very, very long platform this. I always, for some reason, when I first started doing this stops here on the wee trains, I always thought this platform was much shorter than it actually is. So I'd end up stopped somewhere way up the back there somewhere. And again, just return the brake pressure to about 18 inches. Maybe a little bit less just because of the downhill gradient. Plans for the next. To be honest, mate, I really don't do a great deal of planning, in case you hadn't noticed. I tend to just fire up the game and play what I feel like. This was a little bit different because I think I said somewhere way back earlier on, I was actually reading a driver's manual for these trains earlier on today, and it kind of put me in the mood, so to speak. But generally I switch on and play what I feel like, although now that you've said rapid transit, you know, I have not played that in a very long time. So I'm going to concentrate a little bit going through this section, so I don't lose control of the thing and end up with a runaway. But, yeah. could maybe crack the old 182 out for a run down there at some point. There's a good chance it won't be until probably after the weekend. Full disclosure, I'm going to be getting Luigi's Mansion 3 tonight, and I fully expect that to eat up most of my weekend. But I'll definitely, yeah, I'll keep that one in the back of my mind. Rapid transit. I do like that route. It's a fun route. I think I did do a couple of streams of it, and then very quickly I'd sort of done more or less everything I could do from it. But especially since they fixed all the PZB and stuff on it, yeah, it's much better. Did have a lot of fun with it when I was playing with it after the 182 came out. So yeah, watch this space. I'll very well may do that very soon. I have to say, much as I like Ruin Roston, it's I've not played the shit out of it the way that I quite often do with the new German routes. I seem to have just kept gravitating back to Transpennine recently. I'm just putting a little bit of brake on now because we've got that 15 coming up ahead. Going to put a big bit of brake on now because this hill is ridiculously steep. I'll put even more brake on now because I've totally overestimated this one, or underestimated it. Take the pick. First time I did this in a 2,000 ton freight train, I completely lost control and ended up rolling through here at about 35. There we go, it doesn't take much to suddenly be going over. So we're actually going to arrive about 2 or 3 minutes late into Manchester, which is not as good as the practice run went, but the practice run was, as I said, in a two-car set. Just trying to find that balance on the brake, so I'm not slowing down too much, and I'm not running away. God knows how they actually did this for real, because the instruction manual for the vacuum brakes, the real one, specifically tells you shouldn't feather the handle back and forward like that. There we go, more or less exactly 3 minutes late into Manchester. Which, to be fair, not bad at all by 1983 BR standards, I would say. Oh, camera doesn't like where it was there. Oh, bridges, yeah. Camera doesn't like scenery. And there we have it. Let's see if it still gives me a... I don't know what's a good score and a bad score. I mean, it still gives me 20,000 points, even though I'm running late and made a few mistakes out there, so... aye, I'll take it. Ooh, my stopping accuracy was a bit all over the place, though. 70 yards at worst. half a yard at best. Yeah, that needs some working on. Definitely need to do a bit more practice with these longer sets, I think. So that was Leeds to Manchester in the 101. I am afraid tonight going to absolutely stick to the one trip. I've got something of an early start in the morning, I'm afraid, so not be doing any extra stuff tonight. But we'll be back again in the not too distant future, possibly even with a little run around the city of Leipzig. Who knows? But thank you very much to all of you. It's always a pleasure to have a wee blether with you guys while I'm playing with the trains. And I'll see you again soon. Good night.